For more than 20 years, the Australian soldier used with confidence and pride the Owen submachine gun, a weapon designed and manufactured in Australia. This close combat weapon was produced at short notice for Australian troops to use against the Japanese. Reliability was its outstanding feature, even in the jungles of New Guinea. After the war, a study of wartime user experience led to a requirement for improvement of features such as weight, stability, rate of fire, and interchangeability of parts between weapons, without reducing the reliability and accuracy for which the Owen gun was renowned. The Army Design Establishment was therefore given the task of meeting this requirement and has done so with a new design known as the submachine gun 9mm F1, which is now in production for Australian troops.
Early experiments in weight reduction had shown the feasibility of reducing the weight of the Owen gun. One lightened version weighs 3 pounds 6 ounces less than the latest Owen, an encouraging reduction. Some improvement in stability was achieved by the use of a straight stock, but this was by no means the complete answer to this problem. The results of ADE experimentation crystallized the ideas of the users on details of the weapon requirement, and the designer was provided with the final version of the military characteristics. A rough drawing illustrates early thinking on the basic design of the new weapon. The body tube, with perforations along the barrel line for cooling and lightness, would run from the muzzle to a wooden butt of the straight-through type. The stipulated 600 rounds per minute fire rate would require a longer cocking stroke and therefore a longer cocking slot than that used in the Owen with its fire rate of 850 a minute. This would rule out the two-compartment principle of the Owen, which prevented entry of dirt to working parts. To offset this, the new gun would have a cocking handle slide to protect the slot and preserve reliability of functioning, as well as its primary function of drawing back the breech bolt. An easily manipulated safety lever would lock the firing mechanism with the breech bolt at the front or at the rear. This would be a decided improvement on the awkward arrangement used in the Owen, where one hand had to be moved from the gun to apply the safety slide. From this basic concept, 6 pilot models were produced, 3 with foregrips and 3 with only the forward barrel housing for a front handhold. Design trials of the pilot models were arranged to test their functioning. In the new weapon, no change lever is used. Single shot firing is by trigger manipulation only. Automatic fire is achieved simply by pulling through on the trigger and releasing it when required. The weapons were fired in turn at 80 degrees depression and elevation to ensure correct functioning at these extreme angles. In firing the gun with a foregrip at elevation, the handler preferred to use the barrel grip rather than the foregrip. He shared this preference with many subsequent handlers. To obtain authentic jungle conditions, the guns were then sent to the Jungle Training Centre, Canungra. There was considerable interest in the gun proposed as a successor to an old favourite, the Owen, with which these men are experts, as perhaps were their fathers. They were impressed by the new gun's stability. This was achieved by a combination of straight stock, redistribution of weight, and mechanical balance of moving parts. Excellent scores were recorded when firing from the hip and the shoulder. Lifting of the hinged back sight for aimed fire from the shoulder was watched with interest, as it differs from the Owen back sight, which is fixed. The men climbed this tree in turn, with their guns carried behind them, to a fork about 45 feet above the ground. They then proceeded to shoot at a target on the ground. As a demonstration of portability, this exercise was a success, as was use of the gun at a steep angle of depression. Before the start of rough usage trials, the only protection given the guns was to put an empty shell in the breech end and a small wad of cotton wool in the muzzle. Told to immerse their weapons completely when crossing this stream, the men did it the hard way, by immersing themselves too. Having crossed the stream, the next move was to crawl on the stomach for about 50 yards through thick undergrowth, deep sand, mud, and still more water. The crucial test was then applied. Having removed the empty shell from the breech and the wad from the muzzle, each man had to fire short bursts from the magazine which had been on his gun throughout the rough usage trial. This realistic trial was a searching test for the new guns. No holes whatever were barred, and the men were told to forget the soldier's natural reluctance to ill-treat the weapon which in battle means so much to him. How well they obeyed their instructions can be seen here, but the guns survived the ordeal and no damage was caused. The firing results were excellent and there were no stoppages. The sneaker rangers provided further exacting tests. Silhouette targets hidden in the dense jungle growth made surprise appearances to test the reflexes of the men when handling the new weapon and the response of the weapon in expert hands. At this stage, certain shortcomings had been revealed. The safety lever had to be modified to suit firers with shorter thumbs than the designer. Redesign gave a more accessible lever with shorter travel. Moreover, it prevented any effective movement of the trigger when at safe. Its predecessor did not. Another decision was to eliminate the hexagonal barrel locking nut, which was permanently attached to the barrel. A spanner was required to remove it from the body. This is not desirable. The new barrel locking nut is a capstan type with 4 radial holes to permit the use of a lever for loosening or tightening the nut. This lever, or Tommy bar, was provided by the pull-through weight. All these and other modifications proved successful in practice. The prototype drawings were then prepared, checked and approved, and an order was placed for the manufacture of 32 prototypes at the Small Arms factory. The methods used in prototype manufacture are not necessarily those that will be used in bulk production. In this operation, the body tube cooling holes are being drilled separately. This is the retainer for the trigger mechanism housing being fitted and brazed to the body tube. Another body tube fixture is the magazine housing, now seen being brazed to the body. And now fitted to the body and set up on the milling machine, its top face is being accurately machined to ensure correct seating of the magazine. In this inspection by factory staff, the symmetry of the trigger mechanism housing retainer is being checked by measurement. The magazine and ejector clearance slots in the breech bolt are milled on the multiple cutter. And this operation is the grinding of the outside diameter of the breech bolt. In planning prototype production, great care was taken to ensure interchangeability of components between weapons. acceptance tests are carried out on an indoor range by factory inspection staff, usually under the supervision of Army inspection. This is the accuracy test for single-shot firing at rest. Depression firing at 80 degrees will reveal any abnormal tendency towards double tapping. Malfunctioning is most likely to occur in elevation firing because the spring is operating the breech bolt against the pull of gravity. The guns are fired at 80 degrees elevation and depression for acceptance. Technical trials are carried out by Army inspection staff. The drag sand test simulates conditions of loaded weapon movement across dry sand. A filled magazine was fitted in its housing and a second was strapped to the side of the gun. Conditions in the blown sand test chamber are designed to simulate sandy and dusty conditions with the gun loaded and static. On completion of the sand tests, the guns are fired to test functioning. In the mud test, the gun, again with 2 magazines, is dipped in a mud bath. The weapon is then expected to fire both magazines, half in single shot and half in bursts of 2 to 3 rounds. Extensive user trials involving troops in all commands but Central Command were staged with the prototypes to assess their suitability in the hands of troops. This 10-mile patrol exercise enabled troops to become accustomed to carrying and handling the new weapon during movement over difficult country. Movement by road included a 20-mile journey over rough, dusty terrain with some guns lying on the floor of the vehicle where they had been deliberately tossed by order. On conclusion of these movement exercises, each man fired 5 filled magazines from each of the normal service firing positions. Single shots and bursts, including at least 20% aimed fire, were fired. Each man was instructed to observe carefully and report on the behavior of his gun and the suitability of its component parts and accessories. One test for reliability was to drop the gun from the tray of a truck onto hard, stony ground. It was then fired to test functioning. The same gun was dipped in a thin mud solution for 1 minute. Later, it was immersed in fresh water for 15 minutes and salt water for the same period. The gun was fired after each of these immersion tests. "12 units took part in the user trials, and 12 bulky and very comprehensive reports had to be analyzed. Every unit complained of the barrel working loose during sustained firing. This was overcome by introducing a ratchet and pawl arrangement which locks the barrel locking nut securely in the body. Other user unit suggestions were thoroughly investigated before final production drawings were approved. The F1 submachine gun is now being produced for use by Australian troops. Let us see how it measures up to the requirements of the Australian military characteristics. 4 F1 submachine guns have been stripped to the extent allowed the user. These men, who are acquainted with the gun, have each been told to produce a complete gun from the heap of parts on the ground. In surprisingly quick time, 4 complete guns are available for the Lance Corporal to check. He can find no fault with them, but the real test is still to come. Will they fire? Each man receives a full magazine and proceeds to the firing point. The guns all work perfectly. thus illustrating conclusively that all components are interchangeable. The F1 weighs 7 pounds 4 ounces, a welcome decrease of 2 pounds 2.5 ounces over the Owen gun. This man, an expert shot, has no difficulty in meeting the accuracy requirement for a single shot shooting at 100 yards. Firing short bursts at 50 yards, he is able to repeat the performance. The sighting requirement is met by a hinged aperture back sight and a foresight mounted on the magazine housing and zeroed at 100 yards. Stripping by user is even more simple than assembly. The only aids needed are the pull-through weight and the rim of a 9mm cartridge case. The action allows short or long bursts as required by the firer, who simply pulls through on the trigger until he wishes to stop firing.